Hi everybody, my name is Chuck Becking, and I'm here to talk about open source ERP and how it's driving down the cost of ERP ownership. So the goal of today's meeting is to be able to if you're listening to this and you're a decision maker, is to be able to understand what is open source ERP and is it worth an investment of my time to determine is it a viable product for our company. So the tool we're going to use, the specific open source ERP product is called ADempiere. And I'm going to give you a 101 on ADempiere to help you understand what is ERP and can it help your organization better order and shelve, assemble, and ship your products. All right. So first, let's answer the question, what is ADempiere? So the best way to answer that question is to tell you, to go into what is ERP in general. ERP is a really bad acronym. It stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. And that basically means that you take all the typical functions, the software functions that you use to run a business, and you stuff it into a single application. So you have inventory management and order management, and you have accounting, and you have being able to interact with your customers. So you have CRM. So basically take all those things, you stick it in one big monolithic application, and you tie all those processes together all the way down to your general ledger or your accounting system. So that's ERP in general. ADempiere is an open source ERP, and it's quite capable. I want to go into a little bit of a story as to how it came to be, because if you remember nothing else about ADempiere, you'll remember this. One, it's old enough to have matured into a nicely featured project or product, and it's young enough to have an architecture that's scalable, that is maintainable by the average IT department, and that it can help and grow, expand with you. Because when you install an ERP system, the reality is it needs to last 15 years. Now, it may not, but you need, from a planning standpoint, to ensure that it does. And ADempiere fits that role. So I'm going to go into a very quick tangent, but give you a little bit of history behind ADempiere. The thing that started it all, the whole process, was a product called Compiere. And Compiere came from a person whose name is Jorg Yankee. So I met Jorg in 2003 at a Compiere training, and Jorg's story is he first released Compiere back in 2000, or around 2000. And he did that as a result of working in ERP software for the 10 years before that. And during that time, as a director of applications inside Oracle, inside their financial applications project, he got a good idea of what does it mean to build and to maintain a tier 2, a tier 1 ERP application for a global market. Multiple currencies, multiple schemas, multiple calendars, that sort of thing, multiple organizations. So Jorg launched Compiere back in 2000, and in 2006, the community copied or forked the application into ADempiere. So Compiere and ADempiere basically are sister applications. The big difference is Compiere is a commercial open source product where ADempiere is purely open source. There is no company collecting fees behind the scenes for ADempiere. It is a band of global developers and integrators who are constantly one meeting, one day, and 1 month at a time making ADempiere better. So you have this group of people coming together, contributing to the application base, and it's come to be what it is today. So ADempiere is an open source ERP package that came from Compiere, and I think with that, is there anything else I want to mention? No, I think that's it. It gives you an idea of what ADempiere is and sort of how it came to be. All right, next. So how ADempiere helps. ADempiere, or ERP, helps you manage people. So in the process of buying and selling products and services, you interact with customers and vendors and employees. And there's an amazing amount of micro steps that happen, from the purchase order to the material receipt to the vendor invoicing, the matching of all that. And ultimately, all those trickle down to the GL. So the big promise behind ERP or ADempiere for that matter, is that it ties all your processes together in the same application with the same business partners, and so that when you do things as a person at the dock receiving product, that it automatically touches the GL in a way that makes sense for your company. So it connects all those processes together. Now, our plan for today, and specifically introducing you to ADempiere 101, what I want to do is talk about the fact that it's open source. Does it really matter? If you're an IT person, you probably know the answer. If you're a manager looking to gain a strategic advantage for your company, you're thinking to yourself, wow, ADempiere is free. It makes it easier to get the project approved, maybe. And then if you're an owner of the company, what does open source mean to that? I know it's free, but are there other implications? So we'll talk through all those details. The other thing that I'm going to talk about is the commoditization of ERP and what that means to you, right? One of the real questions, if I were in your shoes, I've been playing with the application for 9 years now, but if I were in your shoes, I would be asking the question, is it real? So when we talk about the commoditization of ERP, we'll really talk about, is the application real and what does it do for you? 3, we'll talk about some of the things that make ADempiere unique. So every ERP has its good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we'll talk about what those are in terms of ADempiere. I'll give you a quick demo so you can see the application. The purpose of the demo is so that when you walk away from this presentation, you can use the application in a way where you can actually take hopefully one of your products, buy it, bring it in, store it, and sell it. And then lastly, we'll go over the ADempiere ROI. One of the things that I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation was that ADempiere is driving down the cost of ERP. Well, the question is, how much? And the other question is it just financial? Are there any other aspects to what is to that equation? The equation's a very complex and a very heated point of discussion. That's why it's so hard to choose an ERP. All right. So licenses matter. The truth of the matter is that it's true. Licenses do matter. Let's talk about concepts. When you download ADempiere, you're doing it via what's called a GPL. It's actually the GPL v2 license. It's an open source license, and basically what it says is that when you download the application, you own it. You own the application, you own the source code, you own the right and the freedom to modify it as you deem appropriate. It's yours. So now what that does not mean is that you have to modify it. But interestingly enough, in my 12 years in ERP, in my 9 years with ADempiere, the ADempiere code base, ERP is the one open source application that literally almost everybody modifies in one way or another. Because one of the big challenges that even people who install SAP and these big, huge, expensive ERP applications, they don't always get exactly what they want. Now, an SAP feature, in general, you can bet is going to be fully qualified. It's going to be good, right? It could be too complex. It may just be just good enough, and it may be, it's not good at all. But the reality is, it's not exactly what you want. Now, when you talk about modifying the application, there's what you do to go live, and there's what you do over the 15 years. And granted, 15 years is a lot of time to be able to improve the application. So my point is, licenses matter. And my point is that when GPL, you own the application. The alternative, most commercial licenses say you don't own the application, you don't have a right to the source code, and guess what? It's just a lease. We're going to let you use it. You can pay your $30 or $100 or $1 million in licenses, but that's a right to use the application for some period of time. Fundamentally, they're very different. All right, goodwill. Does owning it really matter? The answer is absolutely yes. The way you conduct your business is the way you conduct your business. If you're a good company, that's oftentimes a strategic advantage. That strategic advantage ties to your ability to acquire customers, to support vendors, and ultimately to create profit. If you reach the point where you have the option to sell your company, the goodwill, your ability to innovate inside your systems accounts for a real dollar value. The goodwill that you get by owning the application when you sell your application goes all the way down to the balance sheet. I've seen situations where a company, let's say it was sold for $10 million. $1 million of that sale was tied up in the goodwill of their systems. The systems enabled them to acquire customers that they wouldn't have had otherwise, and $1 million, 10% of the company's valuation, is tied into the back to open source ERP. So, and then the last thing is, does free matter? So when you look at a budget for ERP, it's more than just licenses. It's the licenses, it's the integrators, it's the customization, it's the time to train, not just the key people, but also everybody else. ERP is an exacting science, right? Everybody's got to do what, the system's got to be perfect, the people have to be near perfect, and it has to be defendable and audible. The question is the fact that is ERP free, does it matter? And the answer is absolutely yes. With open source ERP, when you're not paying a license per user, you're able to make decisions that are right for your company, not right per the terms of your concurrent licenses. There's nothing worse than having a company who's 100 people and the company purchased an ERP for 20 people, 20 concurrent licenses, and then someone goes to lunch, they forget to log out, someone who comes back from the warehouse, they can't log in, and they send an email out saying, hey, who stayed logged in, let me in. Right? Now, that's a funny and somewhat comical situation, but the reality is the other 80 people, they're probably doing work tied to supporting customers, working with vendors, handling material. The reality is almost everybody inside of a company, let's take it in terms of a distribution company. Almost everybody inside that company should be having access to the ERP system. It's just a truth. And when people buy commercial ERP systems and are paying the concurrent licenses, the truth is they compromise on that. And that's a bad situation. It's bad because they don't have access to the system. It's bad because the people who do have access have more burdens. You end up having to create jobs just to be able to interact with the ERP systems. For those of you who've been there, you're probably laughing, saying, yeah, you're absolutely right. For those of you who haven't been there, you can't imagine creating positions just to do data entry. Well, it happens. So the fact that it's open source, not only does it matter, it plays a critical role in your success inside an ERP project. Okay, I mentioned the comment of, is it real? And I want to, before I get into the details of what makes it unique, I want to talk about where does it fit in the world. So I position to you the round rug effect. When you have these big applications like Oracle and SAP, they're like a 10 by 10 rug, a 10 foot by 10 foot rug in a 10 by 10 square room. The rug fits the room near perfectly. If you're willing to pay the licenses, right, and you're willing to go through the added cost and complexity, there's a good chance of the features that you need, they're going to be there. Both in terms of just core features, but also in terms of they will have been and implemented solutions in your industry before. They're going to have some sort of expertise in that area. Whereas with ADempiere, that's not always the case. With ADempiere, my analogy is it's like a 10-foot round rug in a 10-foot square room. All right? It's good, and if you fit inside the rug, it's great. But there's a good chance there's going to be something that it doesn't do yet. The question is, how much does that impact your company? All right. Now, the next and immediately applicable conversation is, what does it do and what does it do? And before I get into stuff like into the myriad of details that go into an ERP, I want to talk about commoditization. In the last year, I've read in blogs and I've read in papers over and over and over, from top research people down to lonely ERP admins. There's a commoditization aspect to ERP applications. The vast majority of the ERP applications out there have the features that you need in one flavor or another. And ADempiere very much fits that bill. I mean, it's been around since 2000. It's got close to 400. Actually, I think it has over 400 windows in it, and they deal with payroll and inventory and bank and inventory, international or currencies, being able to recognize unrealized and realized gains, all a myriad of reports. So from the core feature standpoint, ADempiere is what I would consider nicely featured. So in that regard, it's worth taking the typical happy path scenarios that you have in your company, putting a couple of products through it, and see how well it behaves. Now, I will say this. When I going back to the round rug effect, one of the big areas that ADempiere tends to not be as full featured on is canned reporting. The reporting infrastructure is pretty fantastic, but for example, like when you install ADempiere, it comes with about 3 or 4 financial reports, just the core balance sheet, income statement, stuff like that, right? For any of you who've managed a $100 million business, you know there's way more than 3 or 4 financial reports. Now, as an integrator, one of my jobs is to help create those, but your hope is, as a company, as a user, they just magically work. And just be aware, that's one of the cases when you do the evaluation, you're going to want to focus on the reporting aspect. It's my advice to you. It's just the reality of the world. All right, so what makes ADempiere unique? The first thing I want to talk about is sort of funny. And at first thought, you're like, the user interface is simple and boring. Why would you ever say that? And my comment is because it's incredibly important. One of the things that'll make you smile more than anything else out there is when you're in a room and you're talking about initiatives and an IT person says, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. Well, when you look at ADempiere, the user interface is amazingly simple and amazingly boring. There's nothing fancy about how it lays out. Well, the reason why that's so critical is because it's all configuration based. So you don't have to have a software developer to go quickly add a new table, add a new window, and present it to the user and capture data. I mean, literally, you can do that in a matter of minutes, and you can tie it back into your core processes. So your ability to manipulate the user interface is very simple. All right, and you'll see, of course, you'll see that when we go into the demo. All right, cloud ready. ADempiere is amazingly cloud ready, and here's what I mean by that. You have an application that runs on almost all platforms. And for today's purposes, I'm going to use Amazon's AWS platform as an example. So ADempiere has 2 core ways you access it. One is via a web interface, and the other is a local client. And what's cool is that the way ADempiere works, when you design a given window, it magically works in both the web UI and the Java client, or the client, the local client. And so whether you're running it inside your building or inside a central or a cloud farm, it works amazingly well. And there are even times when you want to use the Java client from inside the cloud. Now, most times people who do cloud, they want to use the web UI, but it definitely works. But just be aware that to be able to take this application that runs on multiple platforms and being able to put it into the cloud and make it accessible to people around the world is definitely important. Now, I want to talk about accessing it around the world too. Making it accessible around the world has an interesting aspect to it. One, the cloud provider that you choose, Amazon, for example, if you want to create a single instance and push it around the world, you have to have the tools to do it. Well, what's cool about Amazon is they're amazingly good at doing that. Their backbone is fast, so to get from from Texas to Germany is roughly 80 milliseconds. Which for those of you who care, it's fast enough to support an ERP and be able to communicate with the database for doing creates and reads and updates and deletes of invoices and all the things that you do. And the ability it runs on PostgreSQL database, which has some very, very nice high availability features, especially with some of the new features that Enterprise DB has come out with. They don't call it magic pixie dust. That's an IBM term, but they basically have achieved magic pixie dust when it comes to being able to create a larger, fast database. All right. So going back to the whole concept of the user interface is pretty simple. It becomes pretty easy to teach users how to use the application. And in my experience, in the last 12 years, teaching users how to use the application is a critical component to the success in launching an ERP. And it's multifaceted too. You teach the core people. You give them the understanding of how the sort of the ADempiere way of thinking, and then expose it to the users. And what will happen as you're going through the implementation process, as problems start to pop up, they'll start telling you how to solve them. And when you can get it in their hands and it's easy to teach them, to get them involved, the process starts moving that much more quickly. So the ability to teach it is nice. And the last thing that makes the ADempiere unique is it's auditable. So one might argue that should be a case of every ERP. And I would argue that it's true. It should be. But the reality is it's not. So when you deal with situations where every single footprint in the system has to be accounted for, going back 10 years in time, ADempiere has some very nice tools to understand who is in it, who modified it, what was their purpose, what was the sequence of it, that type of thing. So for those of you who have ISO standards to uphold to, it makes it very nice. All right, so a demo. Now, let's go into the ROI. I want to make some ROI assumptions to make sure that it's qualified. I'm going to assume you have an environment where you have 100 concurrent users. You have 100 people around the world. I'm going to assume that of the 100 people, the majority of them are closer to one area than the rest, but you have 100 people around the world who need to have access to the system. You're going to be doing light manufacturing and distribution. So you have a fertilizer manufacturing plant. And you have, from that manufacturing plant, you have 4 different distribution centers around the world. And with that, you have 5 organizational units. More specifically, you're maintaining 5 different sets of books, and you're doing it in multiple currencies. So that environment alone gets rid of a big number of the common ERPs out there that are sort of on the lower end of tier 2. A fairly high concurrent user account. You have some complexity to your manufacturing process. You're doing distribution. You're basically, from a manufacturing standpoint, you're doing MRP, DRP, CRP. You're exercising the load a little bit, and you're doing it across multiple currencies and multiple sets of books. Now, I'm going to pick on Microsoft a little bit. 1, they make it easy. 2, well, they just make it easy. So they published a capstone case study where they were very proud of the fact that they offset SAP. SAP was costing Capstone a little over $5,000 per SAP user per year. That's just maintenance. Over $5,000 per user per year. And Microsoft brags in this case study about how they get the per user cost down to 2.3K per year. All right, so let's add that up. So in the process of going live, you have the upfront cost that you have for a given application. Now, if it's cloud, you may pay, say, $2,000, $3,000 per user per year. If you own the application, or not, you actually don't technically own it, but you buy it up front and you just pay maintenance. Ultimately, it comes down to over a 5-year period of time of about 2.3. Well, according to the case study, exactly 2.3K per year. over 5 years, assuming that you spend a fair amount, well, actually, let's dig into it. If you spend about $180,000 with an integrator to go live, it assumes you go into, here we go. It tells you exactly what it is. So the per user cost is $2,371. The yearly software cost, that yields a yearly software cost of about $237,000 a year. Let's assume that your go live cost is $250,000, both for Microsoft and for ADempiere. And let's assume that you're going to be a little bit aggressive. Let's assume that times are good. Your company is going through changes. You're opening plants. You're courting new customers, and you're going to spend about $130,000 per year on vendor services. When you do the math, you end up with a 5-year total cost of ownership of about $2 million with Microsoft and about $900,000 with ADempiere. Now, the reality is you can play with the numbers as much as you want. The go-live cost with your integration partner, the yearly maintenance that you're going to spend, the yearly cost with vendor services to enhance or modify the application, fix some issues that weren't quite working when you went live. You can play with those numbers, right? But the biggest delta between this number and this number is licenses. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, hey, that's not real. And the reality is, you're probably right. It's not real. It's actually worse. The delta is worse than the $2 million versus $900,000. Because when you look at the two extra components about ADempiere that sort of makes it unique is, one, you have access to the source code. When there are things in your ERP that aren't quite right, you have the freedom and flexibility to go in and change it. Now, you're not going to be making architectural changes, right? If you're forced to make an architectural change, you'll never choose it in the first place. But when it comes to automating manual processes, when it comes to tweaking it where you get it exactly right, there are times when those little small tweaks can literally have a tenfold increase in productivity. So your ability to tweak it and make it exactly what you want has a monetary value going back to the goodwill. The second point I want to make is that with that goodwill as an example, because you own the application, because it directly relates to your ability to acquire the strategic customers you need to maximize profitability, it actually is an asset in the overall value of your company. So when you look at the total cost of ownership, if you were to take those two core components, your ability to drive it down and your ability to take it and tie it to your bottom line, the gap widens even further. So that's the purpose of today, to help you understand how the cost of ERP is going down. When you move forward, as you go through your evaluation process, I'm assuming that you're in, or you will be in a position of choosing a new ERP. I would argue that ADempiere should be in the top 3. At a minimum, it's absolutely worth spending some time to take your products, your customers, your vendors, at least in isolation, and drive through and learn how the application works. Because it's been proven to me over and over and over in the past that when you start looking at these bigger applications, a large part of the functionality actually does not match up as well to ADempiere, whether it has to do with how they handle storage or inventory moves or the fulfillment process, whatever the case may be. So it definitely is worth including in your top 3 options. It'll increase your freedom and flexibility, and it'll help drive down the cost of ERP. At an absolute minimum, if it's not as good as the one that you want, imagine being able to go into a negotiation, give the vendor that you do want a demo of ADempiere and say, hey, here's all the things that I can do for free. We need to talk about price. So it's a tool that you can use to help position your company better for success and increased profitability. Thank you very much. My name is Chuck Becking. I'm an integrator and educator of ADempiere. I'm a big fan of ADempiere, and the big thing that makes me different is I focus on education. I tend to choose customers who have a little bit more of a technical base. In other words, let's pretend that you've been on AS400 for the last 5 or 6 years, 10 years, and you have 2 people inside your company who know that system really, really well. You can take those technical resources. I can teach your company how to use and do the simple manipulations inside of ADempiere, and that alone will, there's 2 benefits to that. One, I will teach them how to use the application, and 2, you can in turn use them to make modifications that you typically would have to pay an external consultant for. So you get the benefit of investing in your company, and you also get the benefit of driving down costs. If you were to go back to the ROI on that, that's another aspect of what widens the gap. Your ability to use internal resources to make small modifications that have big gains. All right, again, my name is Chuck Becking. Thank you for your time. Have a fantastic day.